6:02, the joint session of the Coburg Planning Commission and the Coburg City Council. This meeting is being video recorded and live streamed. The meeting includes participants in person as well as by Zoom video. We're on the cutting edge of technology here. This is the first meeting we've had inside the council chambers since, well, it's been 17 months. March of 2020 was the last time we had a public meeting. So this hybrid meeting is, again, we're hoping everything works, and it's the first time for us to try and get this done. Just some information down the road. During COVID, when we were live streaming our meetings, we would have 20 to 30 individuals watching our council meetings and planning commission. So we feel it's advantageous because of our communication policy with the community. Communicate. We're going to try and move forward with continuing to do live streaming of our meetings with the city council and the planning. We're looking at upgrading for cameras and audio system. We tried a couple of times and the audio was in the bottom of a tin can, and hopefully it's working a lot better now, and we'll move forward to having good productions and getting our information out to our citizens. So at this time, I'll ask Sammy to do a roll call.
So we have Councilor Lyman that's joining us through the Zoom. I don't have Paul Thompson is joining us through Zoom. Can you see
Jason?
That's our minutes recorder.
Raise.
Okay, so I believe that's it. So then we have Mayor Smith, Nancy Bell, sorry, Councilor Fox, and then Councilor McConnell, Alexander, and McLean. I usually have a cheat sheet. We have a quorum of the council, and who am I missing from the planning commission? Seth Clark. Seth Clark.
William Wood.
Okay.
You said Paul Thompson's on Zoom.
Paul Thompson is on Zoom. We have
I'm on
Marissa
Zoom
Doyle.
also.
William Wood is joining us by Zoom.
Oh, okay. Then
Thanks, Sammy.
Seth Clark is the only one that's missing.
So we're just missing Seth from the planning commission. Thank you.
Again, a challenge for something new. Trying to get used to the format, and we'll learn a lot from this, I'm sure. So at this time, we are here to discuss the transportation system plan in this joint session with the planning commissioners and city council. The discussions with staff that I have, and I think most anybody that discusses anything in Coburg, transportation is always there. Whether it's the condition of the roads or the traffic or people will stop for us to cross the street, whatever it may be, transportation is always coming up in our discussion. So I appreciate everybody being here. It's a very important topic. I think there's some monumental decisions to make that could really change how Coburg deals with transportation out in the road. So with that, I'll pass it over to Ann, and we'll start our presentation. Ann, the city administrator.
Thank you, Mayor. Welcome, everybody. This is our first presentation in 17 months, so I hope you'll be patient with my staff tonight as they muddle through. It's easy to get used to Zoom, but I really prefer seeing your mugs, so I love your smiles, and I'm happy to see them. Transportation is mostly what I hear about, concerns, complaints, and so as we have been discussing for several months, the need to update our transportation plan for various reasons. There was a point after discussions that I had with several people, including the mayor, with Jake Callister, who is here with us tonight, John Marshall from the Planning Commission, that the plan that we were moving forward was really creating a Band-Aid to our transportation plan, when we really had some really big issues that we needed to discuss as a community. We needed to take the time to talk with our citizens. And we needed to do a full update of our transportation plan. I asked the mayor to put the brakes on where we were, to take a step back and consider all of the things that we need to talk about as a community. So tonight, I have some slides that I'm just going to walk you through what I think as city administrator that we need to consider based on the conversations I have, based on what comes out of community meetings. And then Jake is going to give us a path for how we get to those discussions with our community, and in the end up with a transportation plan that actually is dealing with the issues that we face right now, but also planning for the future. And how will we grow as a community, and how will we maintain that walkable, safe community that our citizens have talked about when they helped to create the comprehensive plan and the community vision. So with that, if we can move forward, Megan. So I'm going to just show you some photos tonight.
Just share the screen on Zoom.
I'm going to show photos tonight mainly to give you examples of some of the areas that I'm talking about. And then Jake's going to follow up with some information about how we can go about making this a project and get it a funded project through a TGM grant. Are we good to go? Can I see it?
It does say that you started screen sharing, but I'm not seeing that.
It's closed.
It's happened to me that I've shared the sub screen, like the PowerPoint screen, instead of the full screen. Sometimes that'll make it so that your lead slide is still there while you make your way through the other slides. I don't know why, but I've done that.
I would share that Dick and I are going to try to move as fast as possible through so to give you a chance to discuss tonight, ask questions. So
I'm on Zoom daily, and this happens to me 3 times a week. I'm sharing screens.
So that one, I think, is your background. I think it's that you want to click share now. Yep, that is.
okay. So I broke this discussion into topics to be considered. And again, these are the ones that I hear about the most. So those topics are local and county jurisdiction, street designations and design, downtown corridor, safe routes to school, commuter and truck traffic, and urban growth boundary access. So we can go forward, Megan. So this is just pictures of what would be considered county roads that are within our city limits. Obviously, Willamette Street, our main drag, and Pearl Street, but also East Van Dyne, Coburg Road North has some road in the city limits, and Coburg Industrial North is partially county road and partially city road. And then also there are, if we go to the next one, there's a map. So the blue on this are all county roads that are within the city limits. And the county provided this for us as an example of roads that the city could consider taking jurisdiction for. So we would take ownership of and maintenance of and the ability to maintain and to manage these roads, set the policies for these roads. So we can move forward from that. Street designations and design. So we have streets in Coburg that are designated. For instance, parts of Skinner are a collector street. Collectors are normally a wider road. As you can see, there are parts of Skinner that are very narrow. Might not be appropriate designation for that street. That needs to be looked at. Coleman obviously is a collector street, but there's no sidewalks or anything that separates bicyclists, pedestrians from the road. While some of the residential streets are appropriate for not having this, Coleman is a road that gets a lot of traffic, and it is going to be going into the new subdivision, which there will be increased traffic. So there are roads in Coburg that we need to think about whether the designation is appropriate for what kind of road we want to call it, but also how that road should be designed. East Van Dyne is another one of those that it is a local road, which means two-way is just okay. As a local road, but as we look at that and the field that is behind that sign, that's our urban growth boundary, and that is going to be an industrial zone that 2 lanes probably are not going to serve the area the way it needs to, because we don't just consider the urban growth boundary and the roads and the use of that road, but we also have to consider the residents that live on the hill and their safety of getting to their homes. And so the city has a lot to say about the design and designation of this road. Can you go forward? The downtown corridor has varied areas that some are of concern. The first picture of Mill Street in Harrison, that is a beautiful street and a safe street that is an east-west connector between the park and the residents to the east and the main drag where our services are, our restaurants and businesses. And then a couple of these streets that I just want to point out is in front of the Antique Mall. The antiques are out to the street, and that person is actually standing in the street while she's looking at antiques. Mackenzie and Harrison facing west. This is actually a safe route to school. This is where the bus stops and lets the kids off, and they're walking both east and west. Then in front of Coburg Pizza, I can't tell you how many people have told me of the close calls that have happened right there. So when we're talking about the downtown corridor and we're talking about street design, we may want to consider that while sidewalks might not be appropriate or safe bikeways might not be appropriate for every street in the city, there are areas of city that we may want to consider a different design. And so this could be part of this discussion. Safe routes to school are very important. We want to keep our youngest safe. And so this is another picture, Mackenzie and Harrison, but also the road that runs past the fire station and to the school. And there's children walking along that route. And it's not necessarily the safest route. Not even talking about the intersection there and the amount of traffic that is in the intersection. I'm talking about where our children are walking, biking, and getting to school. Truck traffic in Coburg is very heavy. Megan and I have been shooting pictures lately and videos, and it is alarming of the amount of trucks that are running through the center of town with their tires in the bike lanes. It's alarming of the ones that are parking and blocking the view of people trying to pull out of businesses or in the crosswalk. So we did shoot some pictures. The other one down in the front corner, you see a biker riding in the bike lane and a truck coming up behind them. It's a very narrow road and if you have 2 trucks crossing each other, they're probably taking up the whole road. So that is an issue that we want to discuss and what's appropriate for Willamette Street. And next. So the other piece that is the access to urban growth boundaries. So again, a picture of the Van Dyne East Road, but also access into our residential neighborhood or residential lands that are actually landlocked right now. And the developer had to pull their application because we can't provide access to the land. And so that's just something that we are working with the region to solve, but it needs to be solved. So when we look at, when we went to the community and we asked them to look at growth in the community, I just wanted to share a few comments that people made regarding transportation, because there were a lot of them, and it certainly rose to the top of the concerns that we face as a community when we consider growth. So we need more off-street parking. Traffic is, main concern is traffic in and out of town. And we need to address the traffic flow. Traffic is a major issue, noise and safety. So this is the voices of our community really concerned that as we grow as a community, how do we address traffic? How do we address transportation? And how do we address those things that regionally impact us that we may or may not be able to control? And so this is an important conversation that we need to have as a community. And that's why I have pressed to stop, take a step back, and let's have this conversation with our community. Let's take the time to do a complete update to our transportation plan and consider all of these elements that seem to be rising to the top as serious transportation issues. I am going to now turn it over to Jake, who is going to talk about what is the path for that. Yes, ma'am.
Can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
You mentioned that there was some development, but the developer had pulled the application because of lack of access.
Well,
I was unaware of that and curious.
so if you remember right, the Weichert subdivision, so they actually withdrew their application
Yes.
and then resubmitted with less homes because the transportation in and out of the neighborhood was a great concern to the community. And so they stepped back and said they would allow for the city to try to figure this out and come back with another application for the other part of it.
Got it.
subdivision.
I thought perhaps there was another application that I was not aware of. So
No.
thank you for that clarification.
Any more questions for me? Yes, Councilor Blaine.
Part of what you're talking about with figuring out the transportation facility plan, is that a little bit tied to the application for the state of Oregon transportation?
Right, yes. So that's what we're going to be talking about a little bit. We are submitting a request to the council tonight to approve an application for a grant to fund this work that we'd like to get done for the community. Jake?
Evening, good to be with you again. Has been a long time. I was thinking, as I mentioned earlier, that this was the first in-person council or commission meeting that I've had, so it's kind of exciting. But I was sitting and reflecting, and I think the last meeting that I had was in Coburg, and I think it was on this topic. But frankly, I think if you went back over the years, there's a pretty good chance that it was about this topic. I think to Ann's point, it's because it's a very consistent thing in the community. And Ann's done a fantastic job of sort of laying out some of the issues that most of you are very familiar with. I think a few of those things would have come as a surprise if any of them did. So the opportunity that we have at this point, and I really think of it as an opportunity. So Ann has mentioned that we had some internal conversations. I mean, essentially, I became the recipient of internal conversations about putting the brakes on some ideas that we had about moving forward. I think it's really smart. It was really clear that these persisting issues were kind of culminating in a moment that needed to be appropriately addressed, let's say. The plan, as it sort of originally was coming together, was that we were going to try to adopt the 2014 TSP. So the current scenario, to remind everybody, is that your present acknowledged TSP is a 1999 transportation system plan, which is too bad because a lot of work went into a 2000, the work was done in 2012 and 2013 for a 2014 transportation system plan that got caught up in the urbanization UGB expansion fund, let's call it, where the transportation system plan incorporated a proposed UGB expansion that never realized. The community concluded that it was impractical for that to realize, but that TSP still included that analysis. And so the concept was, well, wouldn't it be great to have even a 2014, so it's sort of back to the future. Let's just go back in time in a sort of way, and let's just adopt that 2014 TSP. Let's make it a fairly simple process. And let's just adopt what it was, take the UGB expansion piece out, which you could do pretty modularly. You could just take that piece out and you could say, let's adopt this. Essentially bring the baby back, let the bathwater go, bring that baby back. And that was going to take some effort, and we were having all these concurrent conversations about transportation. So the pause button was hit, I think wisely, which was this whole thing just sort of needs a reboot. And the opportunity was that TGM, we've been chatting with the Department of Land Conservation and Development representative for the area. He's been in a lot of these conversations that have been very thematic. So we've got this specific problem, and then there's another meeting, we've got this specific problem. And Patrick Wingard, who is the representative for the Department of Land Conservation and Development, said, you really should look into this opportunity to once again undertake a planning process with funding from the state. And so the opportunity is to engage in less of a, here's an issue, here's an issue, here's an issue, let's try to solve it, here's an issue. We need to bring all this back into a methodic, deliberate planning process and take advantage of some funding to move forward. So what I'm going to do tonight is introduce the scope of work, essentially the proposal that the city has put together for the Transportation and Growth Management Program. And that later this evening, there is an ask of the council to approve a letter of resolution to pursue that funding opportunity. Every TGM grant opportunity requires that the council be behind it. And so I'm going to outline the what. What does this thing do and what would commence? And in a lot of ways, it's fairly straightforward because the Department of Land Conservation and Development, in partnership with ODOT, have a fairly straightforward transportation system planning structure. So the opportunity is both the funding and the structure. And one of the things that I hear often, and I have to echo it, I'm frustrated myself because I've created a number of these plans that sometimes sit on the shelf. That is a ubiquitous frustration. It's something that we always set out to avoid. One of the things I want to emphasize, though, is that I think sometimes we forget the value of the process, right? So you may have a plan that isn't as utilized as you'd like it to be, but we shouldn't ever underestimate what happens when we engage. Like there's a process to generate a plan. We should stick with the plan and we should really hold true to that. But there's a lot of value in what commences to generate a plan. The convening of the partners, the engagement, the absolutely necessary engagement of the community, and the conversations that are sparked, and the documentation that happens in that moment. And so I'm going to outline really quickly the transportation and growth management objectives. So this is a program that's a partnership between DLCD and ODOT. It's all about the furthering the wise consistent planning of both transportation and land use. So it's essentially embodied by those two divisions, right? So you have the departments, Department of Land, Conservation Development, and ODOT, and working together to make those kind of a seamless system within a community. So their objectives are to provide transportation choices, to create communities, to support economic vitality and growth, to save public and private costs with compact land uses, and to promote environmental stewardship. You go to the next slide. So this is a slide that essentially I distilled down from what we're going to see throughout these tasks, which is like, what are we ultimately trying to accomplish with the transportation system plan? We want to ensure methodic public and interagency coordination. So this process is about, once again, being very deliberate and structured and methodic about engaging stakeholders. Those stakeholders are the residents, the citizens of your community. They are the partners that the community of Coburg works with and has jurisdictional overlap and has regulatory authority in some instances over certain components of transportation in the community. Seeking feedback and guidance from elected officials. So obviously incorporating you all in the process, appointed and elected officials, to make sure that you have clear touch points and ability to iterate and contribute. So that's kind of the process piece of this. And then the outcome is this documentation of what happened, of collecting, gathering, once again, in this methodic way, this broadly accepted format for moving forward, the comprehensive documentation and distillation of the process itself, how it took place, what it was that occurred, the conclusions, the community's policies, standards, priorities for achieving a transportation system that meets communities' identified needs. Okay, so those first two steps are really about identifying the needs. It's adding the color to what Ann shared with you earlier, and maybe a number of other things that we paint this picture of, well, what are the needs, how things change. Next slide. So going forward, I'm going to outline 7 tasks, and I'm just going to provide this high-level view. Now, the caveat that I want to provide is I am not at the Lane Council of Governments. We do a lot of different kinds of planning. We have an opportunity to gain experience in lots of kinds of planning, and I have participated in transportation planning. But we have a transportation group, and we work very closely with our senior transportation planner, Kelly Clark, to develop and really follow ODOT's fairly structured approach for doing these plans, but working with Kelly to help us integrate the kind of custom components of the Coburg situation. And so I'm not a transportation planning expert, and this isn't work that LCOG will be doing. So that's another thing to point out. This isn't work that we would respond to a bid to complete, but it's work that we are outlining in general and showing to TGM that program, hey, we've got a concept for how we would want to see this achieved. Help us make a good match. So the public involvement piece, again, would be to ensure that the public and interagency partners would have opportunity at regular intervals to provide feedback and obtain guidance from elected officials. This would be establishing both the citizen advisory committee and a technical advisory committee. So you have the technical piece, which is your partner agencies providing this lens of, well, these are the absolutely have-tos, or the maybe can we iterate on that and figure out what the have-tos are from what you would like and what might work better. It would be an opportunity to gain that. The Citizen Advisory Committee would help with a public involvement strategy. That would be forums and work sessions and other opportunities at the direction of that advisory committee to make sure we're getting a good pulse from the community. Next. Task 2 would be to establish goals and objectives. I wrote down a few of the goals and objectives from the 2014. Well, these are the themes. So this would give you a sort of a sense for how they're broken down in the current locally adopted, but not state acknowledged TSP, that 2014 TSP, which Coburg City Council said, this looks great. And the state said, sorry, we can't accept this because of this component. So safety for all modes, street network and hierarchy. So hierarchy is what Ann was talking about. Are our streets identified with functional classes that make sense? Should this be a collector, right? Anything from the local street to the collector street, to the arterial streets, to the highways, freeways. Do we have it right? Is it working presently? Connectivity for all modes, traffic operation, support for implementation, environmental impacts, cost effectiveness. So one of the ways that we would typically go about doing something like that would be to revisit the 1999 and the 2014 goals and objectives and say, are these, what should we keep? What seems to work here? What is an objective that remains critical now and important? And what do we need to add? What should go away? What should we add? What should we keep? So that would be one method for looking at that. And you could see that being an exercise in, say, a work session or working with the community. Next. So there's two pieces of this next component, task 3 and 4, which are essentially capturing the existing baseline sort of scenario. So task 3 would be capturing what's happening from a regulatory standpoint. What are the policies? It's a survey of what are Coburg's policies, what are the county's policies, what are the state's policies, what are the statutes that apply, what are the statewide planning goals that apply, painting the picture of here's our kind of regulatory framework that we're operating in. Okay. Then the other piece of that would be the physical analysis. It would be sort of a more in-depth version of what Ann sort of laid out, where we look at here's what's happening. Some of that would be reasonably qualitative, some of it would be quantitative, would involve modeling, looking at counts. Others would be, again, this qualitative piece to say, well, what is the community perceiving? What is actually happening on the ground? Part of that would be forecasted information. So understanding what the community's forecast looks like. What kind of facilities do we need to anticipate because of future growth, right? Next. Okay, and then determining the needs. So what I've done here is there's kind of the standard, what you might call boilerplate needs assessment. What I've done here is outline much the same way that Ann has some of the specific examples of needs, both as kind of a starting place to tip off TGM. There is a need. We do need the help, but also as really an entry point to flesh those out further, to find out, okay, well, what's at the heart of these specific needs, right? So things like internal circulation, are the local roads functioning the way that they could or should, or how we should anticipate them to? Does the interchange have a good relationship with local street patterns? And talked about how maybe going forward, maybe it doesn't. If you anticipate some of what's happening on the industrial property on the other side, maybe we're not ready for that. It appears that we're not. Analysis of through traffic. This is just the one that we hear about so frequently here, and you all experience frequently, is the traffic from the north, the freight, the school, all of this traffic that passes through the middle of downtown Coburg. And, this would be an opportunity to methodically characterize that issue and to put it into a process where it can be really carefully considered alternative-wise. Growth pattern, sorry, let me go through these last two. So the build-out scenario work that was done addressed this idea of some issues that relate to, okay, if this is our last remaining buildable land, how do we optimize it? It's just, one of the things, we had the regional solutions group come together, and it was just a very clear issue of buildable land within a community that has very little buildable land, and yet no practical way to access that land, right? So that should be viewed as a city problem. It's very clearly a private property owner problem, and the community can run into issues when it renders a private property owner with certain entitlements unable to use their property. We have an issue that needs to be addressed. Okay, next. Okay, so task 6 is really the meat of the transportation system planning process. There's going to be a couple slides dedicated to this, so I'll try not to belabor it. Essentially, this is where all that foundational work is brought together with the different committees, the technical advisory committee, the citizen advisory committee, the consultants, the technicians who are involved, come together and generate evaluation criteria. So the evaluation criteria become one of the easiest ways to think about, or most natural ways to think about the evaluation criteria is goals and objectives. So if we set out to achieve certain goals and objectives, do these alternatives get us to our goals and objectives? So you can have elements of evaluation criteria that are separate, but somewhat aligned with your goals and objectives. But so some of the examples would be things like, does it address the needs that were identified as local priorities? Is it consistent with statewide planning goals? Does it have support does it have the support of locally elected officials? Does it have the support of the public? Does it address a balance of mobility and access? So you want to be able to move, but you also want to be able to safely and comfortably access the places you're trying to get to. And that's a classic transportation tension. Does it increase transportation choices? Does it minimize conflicts between modes of traffic? These would be things that you would identify as your evaluation criteria. You say, this is how we're going to decide whether we've come up with a good plan or not. So let's get there. Then the alternatives will be developed. Those alternatives range from different street function classifications to very specific capital projects to concepts about traffic operation. So it's a different sort of turning dynamic or a different street section for a specific street type or even a specific street. So it's not like there'll be alternative A and alternative B and nothing else. There'll be a range of concepts and alternatives that will be developed, and those will be by the committees. This will be the advisory committee, the citizen and the technical advisory committee performing an evaluation against those criteria to essentially establish what seems to be in line with what we as a community have defined as our aim, our goals and objectives. So those alternatives would be developed, would be presented, would be another opportunity for iteration on this evaluation concept. And part of that evaluation would be, and frankly, it's a criteria that could be utilized, would be obviously the cost effectiveness, the financial impacts of any specific plan. You can come up with a lot of wonderful ideas that obviously sort of the cost effective or just cost realistic component will play in importantly, obviously. Next. So then the plan itself is really just this idea again of capturing what it is that just happened, right? Capturing in a manner that is accessible. I personally think that the 2014 plan was done really well. If you've had a chance to look at that, big pictures, frankly, not a ton of words. It's one of these things that had an appendix that was probably like that, but the plan itself was just like pretty straight to the point. So if you wanted to do your research and really get into the nitty gritty, then you could go do that. But if you just wanted to engage with a high level interaction, and that's certainly how we would promote and propose that be undertaken. So what is the transportation system plan? Well, some of the key components of the system plan are the road plan for the street network. So again, this idea that think of the map that proposes functional classifications. What are the streets that should be local streets? What are the streets that should collect traffic from those local streets? What are the streets that should be arterials? And then obviously feeding into the freeways and highways. And it gets more specific than that, in figuring out, okay, is this intersection working? Is there something, a configuration that should be done here to promote something different? A transportation transportation system plan can promote things. In fact, the 2014 plan had a fairly bold sort of reconfiguration of Willamette to Van Dyne up there. It essentially said you need to take a wider turn so that you come in at that corner a little more safely. I mean, it's going into private property. I mean, it's showing this is a configuration that would work better. This is obviously something that would take a lot of coordination, stars aligning, but here's a concept that could be considered to meet one of our evaluation criteria, which is it safer? Is it better? Does it do a better job for the community? So some of those would have implications, and you would outline what those implications are. You have a bicycle, pedestrian, air, rail, water, and pipeline plan, your transit transportation plan. And then a really important piece is the implementation plan. One element of this that, starting out with this, there was a question, should this include a component of comprehensive plan development code updates, which you always want to have at least a plan or a concept for the plan converting clearly into implementation. The TSP is a big enough project that our thinking was that you engage in the transportation system plan, you develop a really clear implementation plan, which is a nice bullet listed inventory of the implications for the comp plan and the development code, but that follow as a separate process. The Department of Land Conservation and Development is very committed to implementing their plans. So you're set up really well for a follow-up TGM grant to implement those components. Taking them on all at once, in our opinion, and from our experience, was a bit much to bite off. Essentially, it turned the ask into something that was a bit outside of the scope of what the ask really looked like, and ultimately would have meant trimming back on the TSP ask. That's how we saw it. A financing program, huge deal, is identifying your short and your long-term priorities, a financing plan for how you're going to pay for that. And so the concept is, how do we take what we've talked about achieving and map out a way to do so? I said 7 tasks, but obviously we have to adopt this. So task 8. So the adoption process would be coming back to the community with a plan that is framed up and ready to share. It would include work sessions to vet questions and concerns and final touches on this plan, and then taking it through to the public for hearings. Next. So in summary, the estimated project ask that I've heard that essentially we're attaching to the TGM application request is about $100,000 to complete the work. The estimated project timeframe would be about 18 months as we have scoped it in our concept for how this could be conducted. Who conducts and manages the work? The work that is conducted for these TSPs is done by consulting firms in the state's consultant pool. And so they have firms that work with them on a regular basis, and they make that sort of do that matchmaking exercise. There are maybe some on this call who have more experience specifically with that consultant pool. It often becomes a project that, because there's so much of it that's statutorily driven, there is, from the state's perspective, a benefit in working with a fairly consistent stream of resources. But my experience is that those firms have become very adept at working in a custom environment with a community, particularly a community that has a really strong vision for how they, their goals and objectives. So that's the overview of this application. So the application that we have is, I don't know, what, Megan, 5 or 6 pages, maybe 7 or 8 pages, and the bulk of that is outlining this approach. And when TGM looks at this approach, frankly, they're not going to be terribly surprised at what they see. Because that process is fairly standard, they're highly stakeholder-driven process and highly fairly technically driven process becomes something that we're able to characterize within the TGM grant. A lot of what we end up working on, frankly, is the kind of need picture. That's really where the nuance emerges, is where we say a lot of the stuff that Ann talked about, what we need this, and it's something that we need soon. That's a message that we need to send. If we're not successful with this round, I would hope, go for it in the future as well. That's certainly a pattern that communities follow. But we do want to paint a clear picture of need in this process. So those are the tasks. That's the outline for the grant and gives you some context for that letter of support that you will be looking at later this evening. What questions do you have?
Is the project cost and project timeframe based on 2014's plan adjusted for 2011?
No.
Okay, so those are numbers from 14.
Those are not numbers from 2014.
So they're not. So these are new numbers that have been adjusted.
Oh, yeah. Sorry.
Yep.
Yeah, the 100,000 it's kind of a round number that was thrown out, and the scope was sort of developed to match that to some degree. 18 months is a pretty standard kind of time frame for a TSP.
So, just because you said, oh, if we didn't get it this round, how often do the rounds come up? How often are the grants available?
So they are biennial, this particular one. There are other funding sources that that are opportunities for that funding. It's a kind of an interesting time right now, I'll say, because DLCD seems to be creating, frankly, opportunities that I feel like haven't existed historically for pursuing this work. And so in some ways, I'm more optimistic about going forward. There was a time when, very recently, that wasn't happening that wasn't as optimistic as I would say now, but I don't know if Megan or Ann have information that would be different than that, but my understanding has always been that the TGM is on a buy-in. So every 2 years, you have the opportunity to pursue this particular funding source.
And then if we didn't get the funding, obviously coming up with $100,000 would be a big leap for this city. Is it feasible that we would go back to that 2014 plan? And I have looked at the 2014 plan. It isn't a bad plan. I mean, has there been thought given to that?
Well, one of the concepts fairly recently was to just adopt that 2014 plan, because it was a whole lot better than nothing, essentially, or 1999 plan. So it's certainly something that's been contemplated, and this felt like a better strategy given the opportunity that it presented. And so
many of the elements that come up in the transportation issues, we've received grants, our design standards for our streets, the naming of our streets, and everything else. This seems to be just a little bit off for everything that we want after we went through our vision process and our build-out scenarios to get information from. If you recall, we were looking at Coleman Street, and the sidewalks and the design and everything, discussions that people didn't want, but it's in our standards. So these kinds of issues just keep popping up everywhere in our transportation plan and our design standards and codes. And so that's why, as Ann said, we had the serious discussion that we just needed to put the brakes on this and really look at what we're doing here, because we keep trying to tweak the 2014 to answer some of these things. So do we just keep doing the tweak, or do we just stop and say, what do we really need to do here to get it done right? And I think we've done enough of the other outreaches and stuff, like our build out, like our vision plan, and had enough discussion that I think with the DLCD, I think we stand a really good chance of getting this, especially, I think also because of the remand that we got tied into that. And that was actually a part of the process that DLCD guided us through to that point that we locked those together. And so I think there's just a lot of issues that help us get a little higher standing on this. So I feel pretty confident with it right now. And hopefully we can just deal with all of these issues and not have to go back to the 2014 and Band-Aid it and then try.
Yeah.
That question. Talking about the 2014 plan, it's not acknowledged currently, is that correct? And for us, even if we were to try to get it acknowledged as it is, I don't believe it meets the governor's executive order regarding policies should be stating things like to address climate change and equity. And that's not in the 2014 plan. So in other words, to get it acknowledged, you would have to add those particular elements. So they might as well renew it. Is that correct?
When we brought up the concept with ODOT of updating the 2014, I think they said, let's not use the term update. They were very careful, I remember, to say, let's not call it an update. The way we were framing it was to, literally try to capture where it would have been in 2014. It seemed like they were sort of willing to play ball, as it were. But I think you're absolutely right. There would be implications, and that's what they were alluding to, this idea that, look, if we're updating it, it's 2021, and we have to acknowledge certain things. I think, I would personally think that it would be the things that the state would say you have to update would be manageable. It would be the things that the mayor's talked about, where the community looks at it and says, gosh, this just feels awkward. That we're adopting something that just doesn't feel conducive to 2021. And that was ultimately where we went to the same place you were going, which is, it seems like we just need to update this.
And I think, my opinion is that's where we were going. We were kind of handcuffing ourselves because we weren't amending or updating. We were amending it to deal with the remand. And
Yeah.
we wanted to be careful not to go much beyond that update of just that 2014, because if we did go further, then we would have to start dealing with new laws and requirements.
But I think that one of the pieces that is extremely important is one of the reasons why we have this TSP, because we're not required as a city to have this because of our size, but funding is essential to us. We can't do without funding for our streets. And the funding now is going to require the equity piece, the greenhouse scenario type pieces that, those are the pieces that when you're looking at funding, they're asking those questions. How is this going to address that? And so I think Jake's point and John's point are both very valid points that it's better for us to just do it and include those things rather than to put a Band-Aid on it.
And we're looking at $100,000 estimate for the expenditure of this. And we're talking grants that could be hundreds of thousands, if not over $1 million for the city down the road. Very possible. So I think it's just a good way to go.
We had a question.
Yeah, you mentioned the bienniums. When is the biennium cycle?
So spring is the time of year when folks are assembling the pre-apps and the concepts. So you'd be looking at spring of 2023 would be the next. Yeah. If we're wrong about that, if I've got that wrong, we'll definitely send something
Paul
out.
Thompson is raising his hand. Paul, go ahead.
Well, I don't have sound for you. Maybe, do you have your iPhone as well?
No sound.
Yeah, it doesn't, I don't even have a microphone showing
I
that
would
you have.
love to hear what Paul has to say about this.
Maybe you can type it in the chat.
Actually, can you just call my phone, Paul, or?
While we're waiting for Paul, I'll let you know that we have 3 minutes left in the hour. We'll get some questions answered here. And we'll put it into this joint session. Get ready for our council meeting.
Yeah, I apologize for going into too much detail with the task. I think it's a good idea to see how that process plays out. But I do think it's interesting to consider, or important to consider rather, that if the city's not
Hi,
successful, what we've identified a need, and then, you know, what creative ways do we go forward if the TGM. I agree with the mayor. Patrick Wingard has been at every one of these meetings. I've seen him get caught up in the issues that we all feel here, you know. So it seems like I think the one challenge might be the fires. I know that TGM is focusing on some of the communities that have experienced pretty significant fire, but are we going to try to channel Paul here?
I think it's gonna feedback because she gets too close.
Paul, do you want to try to see if they can hear you?
Yes, can you hear me now?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, I'm seeing it now on my screen. I just want to mention a couple of things real quick. And first, full disclosure, I've served for more than 10 years on the TGM advisory, grants advisory committee. So that committee does not actually score the applications, but it does prioritize funding for certain types of applications. And it does look at the recommended funding. So just wanted to disclose that. Not a conflict of interest, but I just wanted to disclose it. I think it's important if COBRA pursues this, that in working on the scope of work, the city explicitly asked DLCD about the potential impact of rulemaking changes that are underway at DLCD. I'm serving on that committee also to recommend new rules for TSPs, new rules for climate change planning, transportation and land use, new rules for equity in transportation and land use plans. It's a major update. The proposed rules we're not scheduled to be done with our work as a committee until the end of the calendar year, and the Land Conservation and Development Commission is scheduled to adopt new rules in January to March timeframe of next year. But there's a whole bunch of areas where things are under consideration for some fairly significant changes, from parking to land use density to congestion standards to more that I can't even list off the top of my head. So I would just make sure that you ask DLCD in the scope of work to please sort of crystal ball and make sure that you will be addressing those things that might impact COBRA as much as possible. Some of it won't impact COBRA because COBRA is so small, so it won't apply to COBRA. That said, the other aspect of this is that the rules are mostly going to be targeted at metropolitan areas. They're not targeting the MPO organization itself because they can't do that. The MPO is a federal entity and the state rules can't mandate anything of the federal entity. But they are targeting the geographic area that our MPO encompasses, which COBRA is a part of. And the last thing I'll say on that is I just was in discussions yesterday with DLCD staff around them having some funding to perhaps have this geographic area, Eugene, Springfield, Coburg, etc., be the first pilot project to develop updates to the plans when these rules are adopted early next year. So they may actually be able to fund some work for this regional effort that is coming out of the rules. I guess the bottom line is I just wanted to point out that there's a lot of change on the horizon, and make sure that if you do apply for a grant and then get it and develop a work program with the new funding, that it that it's aware of these changes and consistent with them.
Thank you, Paul. Good information. Obviously, we'll want to talk to you more as we move forward with this for any other ideas. Any questions from any of the councilors or commissioners? Jake, do you have anything else?
No, thank you. Look forward to the opportunity to take a crack at it.
All right. Thank you very much, Jake. We're going to close the joint session. We have 7:03. We'll take a 2-minute recess.
Hey, Sammy, this is Will Wood. I'm going to be away for about 10 minutes and I'll be right back.
Yes, sir. I'm going to call the July 27th, 2021 Coburg City Council meeting to order at 7:08. There will be an opportunity for the public to provide testimony during today's meeting. During public comment and public hearings, we will take testimony in the following order. Written testimony submitted to the city recorder prior to the meeting. In-person participants who have signed in to speak, and Zoom participants who have signed up in advance or raised their hand when the time for testimony is called. I'll remind everybody that we are being recorded and live streamed. This time, first time in 17 months, could we stand and give the pledge of allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Sammy, roll call, please.
Counselor Alexander,
That's me.
Counselor Bell,
Present.
Counselor Blaine.
Here.
Counselor Fox,
Here.
Counselor McConnell. Yes. Counselor Lehman is joining us by Zoom, and Mayor Smith, we have a quorum.
Thank you, Sammy. Comments. Been a challenging time, 17 months running Zoom meetings, and now we're taking on a new challenge, trying to do a hybrid with an in-person and Zoom going. This is, I think, the future. We get a lot more participation with the Zoom, and I think it's going to work well. We're doing pretty good with the Band-Aid approach right now, so hopefully that'll keep going. The month of July has been an interesting month for the city of Coburg. We've had some projects that continue to move forward, and really, again, I just want to comment on the staff and how they take on so many projects and keep going and do a great job with it. I want to thank our president, Nancy Bell, who stepped in as acting mayor while I was on vacation, and we had a pretty significant emergency, and it sounds like everybody did their job and did it well, and we got through with little to no stuff stuck on us. The sewer leak sounds like something that I'm glad I was out of state, and you guys handled it well. So thanks to the staff and Nancy and everybody in the community, fire department and everybody that participated and made what could have been a really nasty situation, only a moderately nasty situation.
I think Public Works is to be absolutely commended, and police and fire, you're absolutely correct.
Yeah, I know there was a lot of people involved, so thank you all, and it sounds like it was a great job considering the circumstances. We've got a lot of serious issues that we're going to make decisions on. I warned you at the beginning of the year we would be having many extra meetings, and I don't see that changing. We've got some tough decisions to make tonight, and we've been working on one of those decisions, our transportation utility fee. We've been looking at this for, I believe it's been 2 years now since we initially appointed the Citizens Committee. Lots of information, lots of talk. It's possibly down to the decision tonight, so we're going to move forward with that. I just want to, again, thank the input from the community, the citizens involved. I see Mr. Johnson here he was part of that committee and a big mover. And we just are lucky to have the citizens that we have. So councilors, thank you for being here and making these tough decisions and taking the input, listening to our citizens, and stepping forward and helping to make this community a better place. So at this time, I want to go through an agenda review with Sammy.
We just have one change to, or not one change, in addition to the agenda during the public hearing, I did receive one more written comment, written testimony for the public hearing on the TUF. And I made copies, they're at the front counter, and then I will go ahead and hand them out when you call the public hearing together to order.
Okay, thank you. At this time, do we have any citizen testimony not related to the specific items that will be public hearings?
We do. Mayor, it's Roger Everly would like to make citizen testimony tonight.
Okay, and we give 3 minutes to the speaker, and if you can give your name and address.
So, yeah.
Oh, Roger Everly, 91065 Abbey Road. I don't like to complain or do anything like that, and I love all the businesses that are here in town. I mean, it's great. I mean, I've been here since 97, and I tell you, everything keeps going up and getting better and better, you know, and it's exciting, you know, and I'm looking forward to the car show up here and all, you know, all those things. But I got one, I don't like to complain. One little complaint though, over there on West Amazon and Willamette Street, the turn there in the evenings can get pretty hectic. If that makes sense. Does anybody know where that is? Over there where the new buildings are, you know, the new apartments.
Mackenzie,
Crossing
West
Willis-
Mackenzie.
West Mackenzie.
Oh,
Yeah.
McKenzie.
Chiefs, right in there. People are parking out in the middle of the street, literally. The businesses over on the one side, they made a nice rock garden kind of waterfall. It's really nice there. I mean, it's pretty, I mean, it's nice, you know, coming out down during the day. But the other night, my wife and I were coming out, and she almost got in the accident. She was driving. As they turn off Lima Street and come in, all the cars park along there, and they're out in the middle of the road. And there's only one little lane that you can come through, and we were down a little far, and we came up, and bam, we met there. Hello. Do I back up? Does he back up? What happens? But it gets a little crowded. If there's something we could do, maybe, and I know this is just a small thing for this business or for everybody out here. And you know, just a little small thing, but maybe there's an accident going to happen. And I love all the people there, and I love the music at night and all that. I can hear it from down there. It's great. I mean, you know, other than that, and the water rate's too high. That's, but you know, it's great living here. You know, simple as that. If there's something I can do, I can go to Forest Paint and grab myself their yellow paint, get a neat, just put a yellow line all the way, you know, only about a block or so cars wouldn't park on that side. You know, and I know we like people coming into the area, you know, spending money, and I'm not against that at all. That I'm just a little afraid sometimes, you know, I watch it when I go out, people run back and forth, and it's great. Don't get me wrong, it's just that one little, and I know you guys have bigger problems, so that's all I have to say. Maybe something could be done.
Can I get a little
Maybe not,
clarification?
maybe I'll get some yellow paint.
Thank you, Mr. Everly. I think a lot of people are confused about where exactly this is.
Where they
Could you
park it.
describe that better? On Mackenzie and Willamette? Is it east
Yeah,
or
where
west?
Willamette Street turns into
West.
West Mackenzie,
Okay,
okay? You got Chiefs on one side and the new buildings right here on the other side. You know, and people come around there, but when they park out in the middle of the street, they can come down and park at my place in the gravel. I don't care, you know, that's fine. I mean, there's places, but it's only a few, and it's only
Yeah, it is.
3-4 nights in a, you know, whatever, when it gets really busy there. But, you know, something may happen or may not happen, so.
It only
just know it
takes
happened
once.
to me.
thank you, Mr.
Okay, you
Everly.
understand now?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, by the
Yeah,
old
got it.
oak tree that's ready to fall.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, you're right. There is a problem there.
okay, just a little problem.
Thanks
thank
for
you,
bringing
Mr.
it.
Everly. I know the city is very aware of that entire intersection with all the people and the busyness. So once again, a transportation plan issue that we're going to address hopefully and take a look at.
Well, that's great. I mean,
Thank you for your input.
Thank you.
All right.
Any other comments from
Thank you.
council? Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Comments from council?
On that side,
Yes.
well, is there something that can be done? Can it be a no parking area right in front of the?
One, May I?
Go ahead.
Okay, since I live down there too, I am well aware of what Roger is talking about. And part of the issue is that rather than parking in the parking lot behind the new Coburg Inn, people do park there on the street. The other issue is that on the other side of the street where Chiefs is, there's some head-in parking, about 4 slots. Well, when I was walking up tonight, there was a full-size pickup with a big trailer hitch on the back. It's taking up half of the right-hand lane turning in. And yet it's legally parked. So perhaps you could do away with parking in that area of Chiefs. And then, you know, maybe make it a no parking area on the other side. I don't know what it would take to do that. Oh, Lord, traffic light.
For traffic.
Yeah. But it is and it is a dark intersection. So if you're coming in that way or going out that way at night, there is not a great deal of visibility.
It's just one of a couple. I mean,
There are
Coleman
many.
and
You are
Hudson
right.
Abbott is just where the pizza company is, people go
Yes.
across the street, make that turn. I was talking with Ann about painting a white line down the middle because people are ready to make a left, and I almost pulled into one, and then I've been there and almost put a myriad of things we need to deal with.
It is a problem. You're
Well,
right.
that one in front of Blue Valley Bistro, I mean, can we just do no parking signs, like something simple and
Seems
quick?
like common
for
sense.
short? It
Yeah.
does, but
Yeah.
just to,
It's
just to
not that
make
common.
sure that
It's not.
that's not happening and that they know they'll get towed, you know? Because there's nothing saying they can't park there currently other than common sense.
I think we could also put a sign up when we get the downtown parking set up, that we can advertise that in a sign, you know, with an arrow across the street or something, that there is downtown parking available. We're still working on that lot. So,
What
And-
lot,
and the
what
county
lot is that?
signage.
and the county signage.
What lot is that?
Yeah,
Right
go
away.
below F.
Oh, okay.
So you guys can get back to us with some options with that?
I could put a no parking sign up tomorrow if you
Ah.
want.
I vote yes.
I mean,
Yeah.
that is our right of way right there.
Yeah,
Well, before you do that, I'd like to have you talk to the business owner. and let them
Well,
know.
I think that this really isn't, I think that the property owner knew when they built that probably wasn't gonna end up being parking stalls. So I don't think that
It would be a surprise.
Alan's gonna have a big problem with us putting in a parking stall.
And I don't think so. Go knock on the door first and say, yeah, we're putting a sign up.
Well,
You knew it was coming.
And actually for the Blue Valley Bistro, having people parking there keeps people from seeing that there is outside seating and that it's a nice place to hang out. So I would think they would not be opposed to that at all.
We'll do our due diligence and go from there.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Any other citizen testimony, Sam?
No.
Okay, given that, was there any other comments from council regarding the citizen comments? Okay,
All the citizen comments or just this?
no, just this one.
Just this one, well, would it be appropriate if Nancy let Roger know that we did come to
So
some
I will tell him.
reservations?
I told him all of that. I will tell him that we certainly discussed.
I just think.
Mayor Smith?
Do care.
I did follow up with Roger when we left and let him know that the city administrator would, to feel free to give us a call tomorrow and let him know what going forward was.
Mayor Smith?
Mayor, I think that Councilor Lehman has his hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry. Counselor Lehman, thank you. Go ahead.
I was going to bring this up later, but it's relevant to what's being said now. Later, there'll be a report in here of one of the committees talking about the chief's trees being trimmed and that they were definitely within the city right away, but yet the property owner has a fence on the exterior of those trees, which would indicate it's in the right of way. So I just wonder if this is another example of city property being encroached either by a private party or a business and doing so without city permission.
I can answer that.
Brian?
During the planning phase of the Go Again, they did build that right up to the right of way. So, nothing in what Ellen did there for the landscaping is actually, some stormwater, retention area. So that is actually the right of way. So he built that to, the engineers, the engineer and myself bought off on that stormwater.
Well, the council bought off on
Yes.
the landscaping
Yep.
requirements.
But that's not
But-
cheap.
but
That's not
We're
what
talking
it's
about
the fence in
the
front of
over
trees
in.
on the
But I think he was referring to, is this another case of encroachment,
Oh,
Yeah.
right?
okay.
So in the case of the trees on Chief's property, yes, those are in the county's right of way, and we do maintain those.
It is the fence.
And so the fence is.
Yes.
in the
Did
right
he
of way.
ask permission to put the fence?
I wouldn't have any idea because it's not our right of way. That would be a Lane County question.
But isn't the
That's a
city's
topic-
responsibility to maintain the right of ways? It's the city's responsibility to maintain the right of ways.
It is our responsibility to maintain the right of ways, but we have no say on what happens in Lane County's right of way. Like I said, I think we're gonna talk about that later on down the road, but maybe not tonight, but when we start talking about jurisdictional changes on Willamette and how all of that kind of comes together. It's very confusing, and I totally understand some of the looks I'm getting right now are like, what? That doesn't make any sense. But,
One of the things we're looking at, councilors, is city acquisition of the county roads, as Ann brought up before. Because these issues keep coming up and we have no control over them.
exactly.
And so we're looking at those acquisitions to hopefully deal with a lot of these small issues that are frustrating us and our citizens. And it is a decision that's down the road, but it's a discussion that we need to have. Councilor Fox.
I'm all over that discussion and not for tonight. However, I'm just curious, are you saying that the county doesn't necessarily communicate with the city when they give private citizens acquisition rights? Okay, never mind. I was wrong. Okay, interesting.
I can give a really good example though, that just to give you a picture of how this works is that we maintain the right of ways on Willamette Street, but we had to have county approval for the parking sign that we put in front of the IOOF. We don't get to just put that sign up, even though it is the right of way we maintain. Not only did we have to ask permission to put the sign up, but we had to have their design. So we had to talk with them about what the sign looked like. So what Brian's saying is very accurate, is that it's not just that simple of an answer.
One other comment, Mayor.
Go ahead.
One other comment, whenever it's appropriate, that this comes back to council in terms of the issue of vacating alleys or whatnot. We also have an issue sort of proprietors' signs being in the right of way. I know there's one business establishment that has two signs, one on Norman Pfeiffer Park and one in front of their property that does take up parking. And would like to have some discussion at some point in time in terms of our sign ordinance.
Got that in? Okay. Any other council comments? Moving forward to the consent agenda, we have the minutes for the June 8th city council meeting. Are there any questions, comments, statements regarding that? note that I believe, I can't remember what page it was on, but there's a referral to Ms. Smith.
Oh,
And it's supposed to be Ms. Heath, and I do not remember where it was.
I'll search it.
One of the drawbacks of reading it on the iPad, I couldn't circle it.
I know that.
I'm sure somebody could show me how someday. Other than that, any other comments, questions? If none, I'll entertain a motion. For the consent agenda.
I move, we accept the consent agenda as presented with the modification. Second.
Motion by Counselor Fox and a second by Counselor Blaine to approve the consent agenda. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Raise your hand. Thank you. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Thank you. It passes unanimously. Any special guests, Sammy?
No.
Ordinance and resolution. A252. I will now open the public hearing at 7:30 and hold the second reading of ordinance A252, an ordinance adopting a transportation utility fee for the city of Coburg. Staff report from Ann.
So this is the second reading of this ordinance. There are no changes to the ordinance because the council, after the first reading, did not request any changes to the ordinance. We discussed changes to the schedule that will come up at a different tab, but the actual ordinance itself, there were no changes to it. So during between the first reading and the second reading of this ordinance, staff has reached out to most of the businesses, either spoke with them, left them messages, sent them emails to try to engage them in conversation regarding this. And we've also put social media posts out. The mayor wrote a letter for the newsletter. So we have really tried to engage the community, invite them to give comment. And try to answer their questions when they did call. We had some really nice conversations with some business owners. So at this point, it is a second reading. I have one change in my staff report in the page 3 of 4 at the bottom where it says steps for completion. Staff will implement as soon as possible, but no less than 30 days. It should not say more than 30 days. It should say less than 30 days. If there is a vote on the fee schedule, we will not implement that for at least 30 days because we need to be able to give our citizens notice. I don't want to go over everything because I feel like we have went over this, but if there's a particular subject that the council would like to discuss regarding this, I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
I have a question. Yeah, on page 3 of 4, page 24, the very first line, is that $4,000 typo? Is that supposed to be 40,000?
It's 4,000, so that's per month. So the context of that paragraph is I'm talking about the cost that is appropriate for the residents to cover. So when they're covering 1/2 of the collector streets and the residential streets, that we would be trying to raise $4,000 a month from the residents.
Other questions from councilors? Counselor Fox?
not regarding this specifically, but about the communication, because I'm sure more than one person is taken back by this. And we have communicated it, and I think when we send out notices again, we could reference that, little asterisk that this is not a surprise, because it has been discussed long ago.
I have specifically discussed that with Ann, including making public record, her records of the business contacts of over 70 of the 85 businesses, which find a government agency that's going to contact 80% of your businesses before you enact something. So we have gone above and beyond notifying and seeking input from our citizens.
And I want to make it clear, Mayor, that I did not get to speak to all those businesses. I left messages. I invited them to call me back. I sent emails. For those that I did get to talk to, I sent follow-up emails. So I think that we went far beyond what would be expected of us as a city.
Councilor Blaine and then McCall.
I'm just curious how the TGM, like Jake was talking about, affects kind of this decision moving forward, or if it doesn't, and the city. I'm just curious if we should tie them together, or if we just kind of keep going that direction.
No, I think that the TGM, how would it be connected? It could affect how we address some of the street conditions if we have completed it, and so we've redesignated a street. Say we said a street, we don't want to call that street a collector, or it's not appropriate to be a collector, so we're going to define it as a local street. Then the cost of updating the street may be less because we're not placing gutters and sidewalks on it.
Okay.
And it could go the other way. We might call something a collector, or we might decide that we're going to build the downtown corridor a little bit safer for pedestrians. Like the question about Mackenzie Street, that's a perfect question about downtown corridor construction and design.
Right.
So that could affect the costs as we say, yes, we want to spend a little bit more money on the downtown streets to make them safer.
Okay.
That would be conversations in the TGM, but it won't necessarily tie to it. It would just affect when we get to those street updates.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
And Councilor McConnell?
I had just a clarification on the written testimony, specifically this Deb George that wrote and said that she's low income, and there's specific wording to that on both page 27 and 32. But do we make a follow-up to a concern like this to let them know about that specific language? She was concerned that there was no way for her to have it reduced, and it specifically says they can, but if they haven't read the entire thing, they're not going to know that. So just wondering if we make contact.
So the correspondence, when they're sent, are coming to the council, so the council can give staff direction that they would like me to respond back to her and let her know that, point that out. And sometimes the mayor chooses to do that himself. So I'm happy to follow up in any way the council would like to direct me, but this is really your correspondence.
Okay.
Well, I concur with Patty. That's what I was getting at with the comment before. It was more to the resident who was talking about the gas tag being sufficient. And I was like, we communicate, but not everybody reads. And it's good to remind them that there is a low income.
And if it's, I don't want to add an extra burden to staff's job, but I just think it might be helpful in this case that you could refer her to that language, that there is a process for you to do this.
Okay.
If we need to make a motion.
Just a consensus.
I
agree.
I want to state that my opinion is we all do need to consider the staff capacity, but it is certainly within our realm to ask staff to respond to a citizen comment or question. I mean, that's what we do. So if we feel that needs to be done, then we should do that. To make it a standing rule, if we get an avalanche of responses, then we do something. But at this point, I would like the council to feel comfortable saying, we'd like to have staff respond to that, or I'll say mayor will take care of it or whatever, so that we do have a response. So councilors, I hope that's clear.
Yeah.
Can we,
That's good.
the public hearing, let's close it and then just deliberate and talk about it.
Okay. So we are dealing with written testimony. Is there any other questions on the written testimony?
We did get one new one tonight.
Yes, the one from Ryan, the last one there from Ryan Thompson was submitted. And Councilor Lemon does not have a copy of it because it was a red folder item.
Just a second. So I see people reading. I see Mr. Anderson raising his hand. Would you like to make a comment?
I'm gonna step back and let you go first.
Jim Anderson, 3291 East Pearl Street. I was on the committee, and a great deal of effort went to reach out to the community, both business and residential. And we got a lot of feedback, comments back, and all of that was deliberated. And the ordinance, as I understand it, is what we collectively agreed upon a couple of years ago before COVID. I think it's good that you tabled it to allow COVID to pass. And we're supportive of it. We think the roads need to be maintained. And we think it's fair. And we think the city has been conservative in their fees. And we're thankful for that, at least to start. It's good. And I know the committee was, and I know the city has been very mindful of another tax, another fee, and the impact that it has to everybody. But, you know, you want to live in a great town with great amenities. It costs money. And I think the city's done a good job of coming up with a schedule that's fair and reasonably conservative. And so anyway, I just wanted to applaud you for your efforts, and I think you're on the right track.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. And I want to applaud the committee, which Mr. Anderson was a part of. We spent an awful lot of time with our public work going through many minutiae and detail on our street conditions and road reports and all other types of things to come up with this recommendation that we've basically accepted. We just put numbers in place. So it was a really good recommendation from that committee, I think. Very little has really been changed about the thought or process that we went forward on fixing our streets because of what the work of that committee did. Given that, is there any other council comments or questions regarding the written testimony now that we've had a chance to read it? Go ahead, Mr. Blanchard.
Ryan Thomas's, I guess I am curious about the sunset he mentions about the tax, hitting the point when all the roads are fixed. Obviously, there's maintenance, and so I'm just curious if that is just going to continue. I don't recall.
So in the ordinance, what's built into the ordinance is an annual review. And the council annually will make a decision whether they can reduce the fee. I mean, if the staff is successful in getting grants to cover the costs of repairing the roads, then we might be in the position to reduce the fees. If the cost of maintaining the roads rises, we might, then we have to look at increasing the fee. I hope that is never the case, but I can't control that. And at some point, if the council feels like we're maintaining the roads, we're doing a good job, we're gonna knock it in half, or we're going to sunset it, that would be part of that annual review.
Okay.
And the
The
staff.
fuel tax will continue.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's a good base of our maintenance, hopefully in the future
Yes.
that we would have that as a maintenance base.
The staff hopes to build a platform exactly like the water and sewer platform that we maintain the schedule out 20 years, looking at how we pay for things in the city.
Gotcha. Perfect. Thank you.
Other questions or comments? Any other testimony?
No.
I'll close this public hearing at 7:44. We're going to council discussion, and I'll start. It's been said over and over again. We've talked about this for over 2 years. We've had considerable input, citizen, business, our own councilors and elected officials many times. None of us like to impose more fees or create more taxes because we do pay that just like every other citizen. But as Mr. Anderson alluded to, if you want to live in a nice place, you have to pay a few bucks to live in a nice place. And Coburg is obviously a beautiful place to live. I think we've been very cognizant of the cost to businesses. We're very aware of that. The cost to our residents, and especially the low income. We've always considered that, I think, in our fees, and we do have low income assistance. And I see us just continuing to be helpful to those that do need that. But the simple fact is our most common complaint is our transportation and our street conditions. And so that behooves our elected officials to act upon that. And this action, based on the recommendation of a citizens committee, I think is a reasonable and prudent way to go. And I think the annual review is a great way to go. It forces us as elected officials to make that determination every year and to always have that pressure that, you know, you're going to cost the citizens more if you don't do this right. So it's a hard decision. Many of us have made many of those decisions. It's always a hard decision to implement these fees, but I think we've discussed this over and over again, and it's time to fix the problem, and to fix the problem, we have to pay for it.
Absolutely agree.
Any other comments from councilors? Hearing no further discussion, I would entertain a motion.
I move to adopt Resolution 2021-16, a resolution establishing a transportation utility fee rate schedule for the users and use of the Coburg Municipal Street System.
Oh, excuse me.
That's the fee schedule.
Yeah, we need to adopt the ordinance first.
A2 back away.
That one's nice.
I'm at it again.
I move to adopt ordinance A252, implementing the transportation utility fee.
Second.
Thank you, Councilor Fox. There's a motion by Councilor Blaine and a second by Councilor Fox to adopt ordinance A252, an ordinance adopting a transportation utility fee for the city of Coburg. All those in favor say aye and raise your hand.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? It passes unanimously. And again, thank you to the citizens, the committee, and all of you for some tough, hard work. I hope that's a celebration.
Yeah, I would say to the staff and everybody involved in the citizens, incredible job. I mean, that was not an easy thing to do. It's pretty impressive that a small town like us can figure that out. And I applaud you and everybody on the committee with you and the staff for working so hard on that. That was a big deal. So much Much appreciated.
When I heard the detail that you guys went into on street conditions and reports and trying to figure out the money aspect and where to go and who's gonna pay for what, very impressive. So, yeah, incredible work with the staff and Ann and Brian moving forward to figure out how to pay this and how to justify that payment and make sure that we're putting the right monthly fees in there. So, good job. All right, public hearing. 7:48, I will now open the public hearing on resolution 2021-16. A resolution establishing a transportation utility fee rate schedule for the users and the use of the Coburg Municipal Street System. Staff report from me.
So this resolution works hand in hand with the ordinance. These are the established fees that come from the ordinance. These fees can be updated annually by resolution. So we have, the council did see the fee schedule last month, and we did have some discussions regarding possible changes to it, mainly dealing with fraternal organizations that are community-based, that are giving back to the community, the majority of what they do. I did do research on this. I could not find examples. Mostly cities are not giving a lot of breaks to specific organizations when they're doing this. But I did make a recommendation on the schedule to address that based on the council's input that maybe we could look at revenues of those organizations. So the recommended change was to add a line for fraternal organizations with an annual revenue below $25,000. And that would be a flat fee of $10. And then if a fraternal organization has revenues higher than $25,000 a year, then they would have a flat fee plus 20.27 or 27 cents per trip. So that was what we were able to come up with. All the other fees have not changed. So a single family home will be $7 per home. There's different prices for apartments and condominiums, mobile home parks, and trailer parks. We have both. Assisted living, and then businesses would pay the base fee plus 27 cents per associated trip. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Is the fraternal organization, is that including religious churches and
No.
such?
Assisted living, is it per filled bed or per bed?
It's everything is based on associated trips, but yes, the associated trips are considered per bed when you're figuring out what those are.
So what happens with churches?
There is a church, there's a IT schedule for churches, and we just follow the associated trips for churches.
Other questions or council discussion? Do we have anybody registered to speak?
No.
Last chance for discussion. I'll close this public hearing at 7:52. Having no discussion, I'll entertain a motion.
I move to adopt resolution 2021-16, a resolution establishing a transportation utility fee rate schedule for the users and use of the Coburg Municipal Street System.
A second.
There's a motion by Counselor Bell and a second by Counselor Alexander to adopt Resolution 2021-16, a resolution establishing a transportation utility fee rate schedule for the users and the use of the Coburg Municipal Street System. All those in favor, please raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? It passes unanimously. Thank you, councilors. City will now conduct the second reading of ordinance A 163-S, an ordinance adopting the Oregon Criminal Code, Oregon Uniform Controlled Substances Act, Oregon Liquor Control Act, and the Oregon Motor Vehicle Code, repealing ordinance A 163 R. Thank you. I can't think backwards, right?
So this is the second reading. What this ordinance does is kind of a housekeeping issue. Is what it does is it allows the Coburg Police Department to cite crimes and violations into the Coburg Municipal Court. And I'll entertain any questions.
I like it.
First reading of this ordinance was held on June 8th, 2021. Hearing no questions from the chief, I'll entertain a motion for the chief.
I move to adopt ordinance A 163-S, an ordinance adopting the Oregon Criminal Code, Oregon Uniform Controlled Substances Act, Oregon Liquor Control Act, and the Oregon Motor Vehicle Code, repealing ordinance A63R.
Second.
Motion by Counselor Alexander and a second by Counselor Blaine to adopt ordinance A 163-S, an ordinance adopting the Oregon Criminal Code, Oregon Uniform Controlled Substances Act, Oregon Liquor Control Act, and the Oregon Motor Vehicle Code, repealing ordinance A 163R. All those in favor, please raise your hands. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Passes unanimously. Thank you, Chief.
Thanks, Chief.
Resolution 2021-14, a resolution in support of an application to the State of Oregon's Transportation and Growth Management Program to assist with updating and aligning the city's transportation system plan. Megan.
Good evening, councilors and mayor. Thank you. As you heard about extensively in the work session, staff is seeking an approval of a resolution in support of an application to the TGM grant.
Do we know when we would hear about the award of this?
I'm not sure when we would expect the results.
It would be relatively soon because they really want you to get going in 22. So
We wanna get
if
going in
you're
22.
awarded,
Yeah.
they would want you to have the ability to start your process. So I would assume that we won't have to wait long.
Okay. Any other questions from councilors? If there is none, I'll entertain a motion.
I move to approve resolution 2021-14, a resolution in support of an application to the state of Oregon's Transportation and Growth Management Program to assist with updating and aligning the city's transportation system plan and development code.
I second.
We have a motion by Councilor McConnell and a second by Councilor Alexander to approve a resolution in support of an application to the State of Oregon's Transportation and Growth Management Program to assist with updating and aligning the city's transportation system plan. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Any opposed, please raise your hand. Any abstentions? Passes unanimously. Resolution 2021-15, a resolution to initiate comprehensive plan amendment to the Coburg Comprehensive Plan to amend or delete policy 6 of goal 14. Megan.
Thank you again, counselors. So this also ties into the work session discussion on transportation. What this is asking is for an approval of a resolution to initiate a comp plan amendment. And there are two options for how that would look. The first option is to amend policy 6, which would add a bit of wording to the language in that policy. The second option is to delete it entirely. And if you have any more questions about those two options and recommendations, Gary will be happy to answer those.
Yeah, legal counsel would recommend option 1. And the reason is that LCDC has an administrative rule that says if your annexation is consistent with your comprehensive plan, you don't have to make findings regarding the statewide planning goals. But if your comprehensive plan, if the annexation is not consistent with the comprehensive plan, then you do. And that's a headache. It's a lot of staff time, a lot of unknowns, brings a lot of other issues that shouldn't arise during a simple annexation process. So I would recommend modifying the policy, specify what are the extra urban growth boundary exceptions that you want to include right away, for instance. And then I would run it by DLCDC to make sure that they're comfortable with the language. Their concern primarily is that the city not urbanize, if you will, any land outside the urban growth boundaries, either by providing services or allowing a denser development on-site systems. So I think the language we have now suggested probably would pass muster with DLCD. We may want to tinker with it a little bit, and I would recommend running it by them before we put it in ordinance form.
Mayor, add a few points that I think that council needs to hear. This was brought about by a problem that we were trying to find a solution to with the region. And that has to do with East Van Dyne. That's what started this conversation. East Van Dyne is a county road that is adjacent to our urban growth boundary for industrial lands. When the city started having a discussion with the region about what should that road look like, we had very clear expectations of how that road would be built. But we were unable to implement those because on our own, because we don't have jurisdiction over the road. It's not in the city. And so the county suggested that the city take jurisdiction of the road. And then we could implement what we would say is our street design of a collector street. There was a lot of conversations and a lot of back and forth of we talked about this, but that's not going to work. And we talked about going back and amending our urban growth boundary to include the road. That was going to be a headache in itself. So we have looked at multiple options of how we solve not just the Van Dyne one over there, but the Van Dyne, the problem over here. And so this is what we've worked out with our regional partners is this is a step process that the city's going to have to go through this. And this is the first step is we need to amend our comprehensive plan to allow for the annexation of a right-of-way that is adjacent to an urban growth boundary. And then the city can then take jurisdiction of the road once we annex it from the county. And then we can design the road, or we can designate what the design of the road will be. So this is a step-in process for which you guys are gonna have several steps. And so I just wanna make sure you have that context, that this is the first step.
So, question. Are there any drawbacks that we might not be foreseeing of doing this? Is there any-
Honestly, the Van Dyne Road that was annexed with the urban growth boundary before, that where Premier RV and everything is, the road there was included in the urban growth boundary. So this is really a step into fixing something that was overlooked when we annexed that. It should have been caught, it wasn't. So really, this is our avenue for fixing something that, it's unfortunate, but there's a way to fix it, and that's what we're trying to do.
In updating our transportation plan and looking at other aspects, the acquisition of these right-of-ways so that we have more control over them is a serious issue that we're looking at. Because we're running into these problems of trying to get our standards, but the county has different standards and they're going to use ours. We had hoped that ODOT, because it was in the IAM, would be able to do something with it and override that. But it's not working. So this is a step. We take this process, and it sounds like, as Gary was saying, this resolution would say we're going in this direction, go to the LCD or LCDC and say, is this the right wording? And then through ordinance, we would adopt the actual wording to go forward.
Okay, so that's option one.
Yes.
And there's been about 4 multi-jurisdictional meetings. This is only the first step, but it's a big step.
It's very complicated. And the county would have tried to fix this, but they have their own rules that they have to follow. So we're all working together as a region to solve this. And so.
Any questions from councilors? I would entertain a motion.
I move to approve resolution 2021-15, a resolution to initiate a comprehensive plan amendment to the Coburg Comprehensive Plan to amend policy 6 of goal 14.
Second.
We have a motion by Councilor Alexander and a second by Councilor Fox to approve resolution 2021-15, a resolution to initiate a comprehensive plan amendment to the Coburg Comprehensive Plan to amend policy 6 of goal 14. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Please raise your hand. Any abstentions? Passes unanimously. Thank you, Gary. And intergovernmental agreement with City of Cottage Grove for building permit program services. Addendum 1. Megan.
Good evening, councilors and mayor. The next thing I have before you is addendum 1 with our IGA with Cottage Grove, who provides the building permit services. Since June of 2020, the city of Coburg has been working under an IGA with the city of Cottage Grove for this program. And this addendum is to more accurately reflect the costs that program is taking on Cottage Grove. Cottage Grove also serves 2 other cities, Bonita and Cresswell. Coburg currently pays 15%, Cresswell pays 15%, Bonita pays 20%, and Cottage Grove pays 50% of the program, and that is based on our use. If you have any further questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
How is the relationship with the permits?
I could not speak more highly about our relationship with Cottage Grove. They answer the phone, they answer the questions, they are so easy to communicate with, they are so helpful. Anytime I have to reach out, I can't say enough good things about our relationship with the building permit program.
I asked the question because it's our third relationship in about 4 years, and it's an awkward thing to have, start with one entity and end up with a second entity. So I hope it's a long-term relationship.
I hope so too. Maybe third time's a charm.
Yeah.
I can tell you that this is a highly professional organization. Faye Stewart runs an amazing shop and provides a leadership not just to his building, but to the buildings he serves, including ours. And so I couldn't be more happy with the services that we're providing. We're providing from Cottage.
The plans examiner, the building inspector, the building official, the folks who just do administrative and answer the phone, always more than willing to go above and beyond to answer any questions.
So what's the Yang side to that? Is there a negative, or is there anything that could be worked on better?
You know, honestly, I sometimes that they get a little busy and it takes a little bit longer to review our permits, but it's never really very a long time, maybe 2 weeks. I honestly don't have any complaints about the relationship working with them.
Has there been much pushback from like people trying to get permits here in our city about timing and accessibility to them?
No, not so much. I usually will explain the process up front and let them know, you know, we'll go through planning review here at the city of Coburg, and then you'll go to Cottage Grove for building review, and people are pretty happy. I think telling them up front helps. And like I said, Cottage Grove's really excellent with communications, so people are looped in with email and telephone right away, and when they have questions for them, they can just direct them there.
I've actually talked with 2 contractors that are very happy with the turnaround because other agencies take 3 to 10 times longer.
Yes, yes. Yeah. I think that our turnaround's actually pretty quick.
Yes. Good.
Yeah.
Any other questions or comments from council? This time, want to take a motion?
Good. I move to approve the city administrator to sign amendment 1 to the June 8th, 2020 intergovernmental agreement with Cottage Grove for the purpose of providing building permit program services to the city of Coburg.
Second.
Motion by Councilor Fox and a second by Councilor Blaine to approve intergovernmental agreement with the city of Cottage Grove for building permit program services addendum 1. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Any opposed, please raise your hand. Any abstentions? Passes unanimously. Grant funds acceptance from Cascade West Economic Development District. Megan.
Good evening again. I think we saved the best for last this time, in my opinion. So what I have before you, the last thing that I have for you this evening is accepting grant funding from the Cascade West Economic Development District in the amount of $7,277 for us to purchase new appliances for the IOOF kitchen. Staff submitted this grant. It was a quick turnaround as many of these are becoming available. This is some CARES Act money that the Economic Development District put out specifically for resilience and recovery. And so they received a good amount of applications. They received requests for over $250,000, and there was only $100,000 available. And I'm happy to answer any questions related to that also.
Countertops.
Countertops, yes.
What does that mean?
Stainless steel. Sometimes they're connected to the 3-basin sink.
Right.
Yeah.
It'll be a commercial kitchen.
Yet to be determined, but
yeah,
there's some work that needs to be done in the kitchen, and
Yeah.
working on that.
I guess I'm asking how much, how large are the countertops that you're looking at?
we haven't actually ordered any of the appliances yet, so we'll still need to go in and measure and see what will kind of work best and be the best investment for us. So if it's, you know, I'm not quite sure of the dimensions.
The same answer for fridge and so on.
What's that?
Same answer for refrigerator.
Yes. I imagine some large commercial double door fridge, something industry standard for a commercial kitchen.
The entire kitchen's probably a 10 by 22. And it's got the service counter and a very small storage covered counter area, and then the working counter that could be a possible 14 feet long. But you would include the sinks in that.
Okay.
Councilor McConnell?
So will this make it compliant so that we can rent it out, or do we have to do more work in order to do that?
We will still need to do some work as far as the health department regulations go, but this will be a very large step in that direction.
You should see the overhead lighting.
Oh, I was saying. Plug-ins.
Yeah, we're working on it.
Nail biter.
We're working on it. Any other questions of Megan? I'll entertain a motion.
I move to approve the acceptance of the $7,277 grant award from Cascade West Economic Development District's Resilience and Recovery Program for the new commercial kitchen appliances for upgrades to the IOOF Hall in Coburg.
I second.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
That was
Thank you for
easy.
There's a motion by Councilor Bell and a second by Councilor Alexander to accept grant funds from Cascade West Economic Development District. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Any opposed, please raise your hand. Any abstentions? Passes unanimously. Thank you, Megan.
Thank you.
Administrative reports, we have our financial written. Were there any questions to Tim for that?
So I'm just going to go over the highlights real quick. So what we have is the financial report through May 31st of 2021. That also includes some information on April as well, so it's a 2-month report, so to speak. So this is our 11th month. We'd like to see our revenues at 92%. That's not the case. And as I think most of you know, the revenues a lot of times are about a month behind. So we'll realize the May revenues in June. Things like franchise fees and taxes come in June. Same thing goes for June. So the next report will be waiting on some revenues as well. You'll see our revenues are actually 1.13 million higher than last year, but sometimes that can be a little deceiving. We do have a $648,000 water reimbursement, water project reimbursement in there, so that makes it a little bit inflated, as well as a $100,000 small city allotment grant for the street work we did on over at Camp World. So those numbers are can be a little deceiving, but we're headed in the right direction. So we also did, in June, we did a $400,000 transfer from the URA to the SER fund to help support the bonds there, the bond payments. Taxes through June 31st are $821,900, and that's $92,600 approximately higher than it was last year at the same time. So that's great. That's an awesome thing there. And as far as our expenses go, they are higher, so about $769,000 higher, but that's mainly due to the water project, which we were reimbursed for. So as we get closer to the end of the year, right now our expenditures are 5% over our revenues, but that gap will start to close as we realize the revenues for May and June and July and August, early August. So we should have everything collected by August. So we're very happy with where we're at. It's been a tough year, but financially we're okay.
So due to COVID last year, sorry.
Go ahead.
Due to COVID, we budgeted for taxes cautiously.
Right.
And we're, so how much, what percentage did we exceed our budget by?
Let's see, I have that here. I don't know if I have that, but I can get you that number.
Okay, I was just curious.
Sorry.
Other questions?
Well, it is encouraging to, I always wonder about what, okay, if it's supposed to be at 92%, why are we only at 69%? But you addressed that.
Yeah.
And if I read further or assimilated further, we're better shape this year at 69% than we were last year at the same time at 49%. So as you say, looks like we're headed in the right direction.
Yes, for sure. And I can certainly email, if council would like, I can email what we budgeted.
That's okay, we just went over this.
Oh, okay, thank you. Any other questions? Thank you. It's really nice to be standing in front of you guys. It's awesome, actually. So hopefully we can continue that.
It's good to have good news.
Yes.
Thanks, Tim.
It's easy too.
All right, administrative monthly report.
I and entertain any questions that I have. The water project is coming along. We will be meeting, I have a note in here about Premier RV. If you read it, that we will be meeting with them tomorrow. We met with our engineers today. So we will know more about that situation tomorrow. And basically what that means is if Premier RV is in trouble for potable water, then we need to try to get it to them as fast as possible. We do have the opportunity or the choice of declaring an emergency for this. In order to get a pipeline to them as fast as possible, we'll determine whether or not that is needed by them tomorrow, and how fast we could actually get it to them. But I don't have an answer for you on that right now. I just want to make sure you're aware, because declared emergency will include a council action. So I want you to have that in the event that it's coming to you, know the background of it.
Councilor Fox has a question.
So it says if it's due to the drought, and I remember when their ponds were there, that was a big issue. So there could be other reasons for the.
Yeah, and we don't know. So our engineer, the person that called me from Premier RV probably doesn't have the information that our engineer has about the area. He's been here years. He's done an amazing amount of work for the city. And when we met with him today, he said that you can't really compare their irrigation wells with their potable well. And so while there may be a problem and they're supposed to be having an analysis done, he really wasn't as concerned as Premier RV about it, but we will see. We don't know. The irrigation wells are shallow wells, and so that could definitely be attributed to drought. So, Brian, do you have anything else to offer on that?
No, I agree with Damien. I think we talked about that the first time we met Premier RV. We really need to see something from them that says that their domestic well is something's going wrong with it. There was really no indication that the domestic well had an issue. It was more mainly geared towards their irrigation wells. They were going to try and get some water from a shared well from the neighbors. And I think we'll know a whole lot more tomorrow on whether we need to fast track getting that line hooked up for the I-5 board across the east side and starting up the hill towards the reservoir location.
While we're on the water project, this was supposed to be a 3-year project. What's the timeline look like for our water master plan project?
You want to?
Yeah, so due to COVID, not the cities, because we've been working, but due to COVID, things are behind. We've had substantial trouble getting some things through review processes and working with other agencies occasionally. So we have applied for an extension just to make sure we have enough time to complete it. So they have they granted us an extension. We have to sign the paperwork, which Sammy has right now, and we will execute it to December of 2024 to complete the full project. So that's about 15-month extension to get the whole project done.
Thank you.
I feel fairly optimistic that we will hit that number.
Yeah. Let's see, staff positions, again, congratulations to Megan. Megan's been promoted to the staff planning position at the city. Very happy about that. We also are happy to welcome Sarah Dean to our administrative staff. She started on Monday. I'm very excited to have her here. And then today, I was able to hire the economic development position. Tracy Pugh will be joining the city. She is going to be our Main Street coordinator part-time, and she's also serving as for the chamber as the antique festival coordinator. And I would see her stepping up and to get involved in several of the city's festivals. She comes with an extensive background in event management, in economic development, and I think that she's going to be a great fit. So we're very excited to have her join us next Monday, and we will have a full staff.
Awesome. And then we got somebody else in Public Works.
And Corbin in Public Works, yes, thank you for pointing that out. We do have a full staff. So,
Finally.
That's exciting.
yes, we're very excited.
Now you get to work.
Now we can buy more stuff.
Quit messing around.
Just a few notes about the American Rescue Plan. We actually got the final version of what we can spend the money on. It's about this thick, but they have definitely narrowed it. So I will be providing council more information on that. What we did get was a contract in the mail, which it just came an email and said, you got to sign this in order to get the funds. And so we're working on getting that signed, filled out and signed. They asked for a bunch of information, so we're going to get that back as fast as possible. And then definitely we can talk about what we can do with the funds. But again, it has been substantially, I think, narrowed from what our governor initially put out about what we should think about spending it on. So, but there's still plenty that we could do with the funds. So,
Like, can you give us some specifics about how it's been?
yeah, so we can provide help to the community, the businesses, local businesses. We can provide grants for local businesses or a loan program for local businesses. We can spend it on developing housing for the community. If we determine that there's a housing shortage in our community, we could put some money towards a public-private partnership for housing. We can spend it on infrastructure for water, sewer, or broadband. If we had employees that were assigned to COVID, we could cover salaries. We can, so those are some of the things that the city could use it for. There's lots of programs. If we had clinics or needed to set up clinics in the community, that we could do that. We can contribute to nonprofits, so such as we're doing for economic development to give money to the chamber. That's an allowed use. So it's really how you get your community back on track. And the infrastructure is a highly important piece that they're encouraging. We have to follow the standards that we would follow if we were borrowing money from Business Oregon. So we have to follow those same standards. But there's a lot we can do with the funds. There's also more money coming, so we want to be thoughtful. I wanted to update you on the alley vacation. So from when I wrote this report, the property owners have not been able to come to a decision as to what they want to do. So the request is just clear the alley so we can use it. So what that means is that the owners that are encroaching in the alley will have to move their property. So legal is working on a letter to the property owners telling them that they need to move their property out of the alley. And that's where that's at. I am happy to answer any other questions I have on this. I'm sorry.
Does that mean that we would have to open up that fence that's blocking the end of it?
No, no. Not unless the city decides to run that through. If the council or the city decided we want to move that fence and open up that road, then the fence comes down. But at this time, the property owners that are adjacent to the alley just want use of the alley. So
other than the builder, no one else wants to.
the other, so the builder is who's asking
Use of it.
use of the alley for the properties.
Is the builder going to be still willing to help move that building like he had originally said?
He verbally told me he would help demolish it. He would not replace it. So
Has it caused hard feelings with the neighbors?
yes.
Yeah.
Yes. It's an uncomfortable situation for everybody.
Yeah.
So all we can do as a city is follow our rules, and that is that we actually have some historic documentation on the particular property that's encroaching in the alley, and so it very much supports the city's basis that this is an illegal structure and it wasn't permitted. Our legal, we're turning it over to legal. It's Gary's.
Always wise.
So anyway, I'm happy to answer any other questions. I do know that Brian would like to address the council on a public works issue that has come up. And so, yes.
One quick question. Are we getting our pop-up tables for the park, or is that?
We didn't get funded for that. That was one we didn't get. So.
Did we lose our benches? Or did I miss why the benches aren't there anymore?
Benches?
All the benches that were at the park on the cement paths, they're not there anymore?
One is still at the shop.
Oh, okay.
It
So
just
you put the
hasn't
other
been put back together.
Oh, okay.
Yep. It's been rebuilt, but it has not been, that's probably gonna happen Friday because of the heat.
But I do think the park committee is talking about tables for the park.
And
tables.
Brian?
I'll start with a little background. I think we talked about this in the June city council meeting about some fines that were levied due to some permit violations at the wastewater treatment plant. So we do have a meeting with DEQ set for August 10th, and I will know a lot more about how we're going to negotiate with DEQ on lowering fines and things like that. So the backstory is these are all chlorine level violations. And I think I'm just kind of going to go over what we talked about in the June meeting. Our permit level for chlorine is 0.1 milligrams per liter. 2 out of the 3 violations were 0.17 milligrams per liter. And all 3 of these are due to the way the plant was designed and set up for doing the maintenance claims of the membranes. So injection happens of hypochlorite or bleach at a high concentration. Now, if flow going through the plant isn't enough, and the flow control for the dechlor doesn't push those pumps to dose more of the dechlorination solution, then that chlorine residual is a little bit higher going out the door. So for the first 7 years of plant operation, I paid really close attention to what was happening during those maintenance cleans. Now, I've moved into a different position since that time, and we have made, and this is all on me, I'm not trying to pass the buck on anybody else, but because all decisions at the plant come through me. We made a decision at the plant to try and save a little bit of money on chemical because of the high dosage of the dechlor, right? So twice a week we were doing these maintenance cleans. So we were running those dechlor pumps a little bit higher to compensate for the higher chlorine residual. So we didn't really have to worry about it in the past. I got really uncomfortable with dosing the, it's calcium thiosulfate. It's such a high dose. Now there's no regulation on the calcium thiosulfate, right? But it does add to the BOD, and I really don't want to get into the specifics of why that is, but it's in my personal opinion, the calthio is a little bit, it's not as toxic as chlorine to the environment. We just didn't want to be putting that much chemical into the irrigation ditch for no reason. So we dialed it back just a little bit, and that's when these violations occurred. Now, they didn't all happen all at the same time. So imagine twice a week of these maintenance cleans. We did it, we violated 3 times. So over the course of the year, so 104 times during a clean, we violated 3 times. So the odds that we were doing a good job matching the level of dechlor going out the door was fairly high. We just missed our target by this much twice, and one time by a lot because of, I'm thinking it was because of rainfall, but I really don't know that for sure. So while I was gone on vacation, Ann got a phone call from the Register Guard, and they were wanting to know if we were going to what was the term? Appeal the fines. There was some confusion because of the sanitary sewer overflow earlier this month and this violation fine that we were imposed. The two are definitely separate. In fact, I haven't heard anything from DEQ about the overflow at all, and I've called and emailed numerous times. So an article was written over the weekend and posted on Saturday. I think it was Saturday. Anyway, the Register Guard wrote a piece about Coburg was fined for violating their permit. And just so everyone knows, if you go to that and you can see it, their chlorine level that they have listed is wrong. Our permit, and I believe that it was set up this way because the DEQ realizes that we have a little different discharge area. Our permit is actually 0.1. The industry standard is 0.019. So they were correct when they wrote what the industry standard is, but they didn't get our permit limit correct. So they were wrong in their article. And I just wanted to address you guys to make you aware that this is coming down. We've talked about it a couple times now. I take full responsibility for it. The sewer plant has been, I've been there since week 1. So it's dear and dear to my heart. Anytime we have a violation, we hurt the environment in any way, I take that personally. So we try really hard not to do that stuff. So there was some correspondence today from a citizen that was not happy and was thoroughly embarrassed for the city. And, I happen to agree with that person on that aspect. It is embarrassing. But what I will say this is we would much rather be honest with the DEQ on what happens at the treatment plant. Because when you're dishonest about it, you look way worse. So anytime we're even that close to a permit violation or that much over permit violation, we're going to be honest about it.
And you report that?
Yes,
Is that
ma'am.
correct?
Every
Yes.
time. Every time.
So that's a self-report.
Yep.
That's not
Yep.
DEQ catching you out.
Right.
Thank you.
Yeah, so every time we have a permit violation, it's reported that day. Does anybody have any questions? Yes, sir.
Two, what is the, it was said before, I'm forgetting, what was the extent of the fines? What is the,
$4,200
for all three?
for all three total. Yes, sir.
That, sorry.
Follow up, it's financial, because my next one is chemical.
Well, I guess, yeah, then I'll go along with it.
Okay.
Did that exceed the amount you were trying to save?
That's a great question. Probably not. Probably not. But when you look at environmental impacts, probably so.
Yeah, I figured.
So that follows up on that. Well, you lost me when you said you were dialing back on one and adding, how did that, by dialing back on the chlorine, create a?
Well, we didn't really necessarily dial back on the chlorine because it takes the same amount of chlorine to do those maintenance cleans every time we do it. But we've been dosing it a little bit higher dechlor rate to compensate for that larger chlorine residual or higher chlorine residual. So what we were trying to do was bridge the gap and bring it back down to where we weren't wasting chemical, but we were meeting permit. I hope that makes sense.
You were trying to get to the Goldilocks.
Yeah, we were trying to hit the.
Just right.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep, exactly. So, and like I said, for out of 104 times, we did well.
Statistically.
Yeah,
that's pretty good.
101 times.
Have we talked to the register guard?
I haven't talked to them since
As
they
far
called
as-
us. So what I did with Register Guard is invite them to meet with us and that Brian could explain to them, give them the facts of what happened. They weren't interested in that.
No, I'm sure not, but
But
they have given incorrect
They have
information.
given.
Yeah, and to be fair, Ann didn't know that until just now.
Yeah. I did.
Because I literally just read that article that was attached to the complaint.
And to be clear too, is that while they put City of Coburg on the front page of the electronic
Right.
thing, there were many cities listed. They just happened to use us as their front page.
On the digital
On the
edition.
digital edition, so.
That's correct. I should have specified.
Because I saw that first and went, oh, and then when I actually read the paper, I went, oh, well, that wasn't the headline. And Coburg was one of many, and our fine, and no fine is good, but the fine that Coburg incurred was much smaller than any of the others.
I really wish DEQ would change their policy and how they approach these fines. And I understand there's a process because for us, when we get the notice, we send them a notice back saying that we want to have a hearing. Now, some cities and some districts, they don't do that. They just pay the fine. There are some cities out there that build it into their budget too, that they know they're gonna not meet permit, and so they're just gonna pay for it. We don't like that approach. We would much rather fix. And so to wrap this all up in a big bow, we have fixed that problem. It now is taking twice as long to do those maintenance claims, but we've taken it out of an automatic system, and it's operator based now. So now we have to have one guy do those so we meet permit, but we'd much rather do that than face those fines.
Then have the negative publicity.
Exactly.
Really is what we're struggling with.
Shouldn't we do something to set that record straight though?
I will. And in the hearing, I will say, I wish that you wouldn't release things to the media until after the hearing is over, so they can get the full story of this is what happened, this is what was negotiated, this is what the city of Coburg is actually going to pay. And a restitution or a monetary fine, or trading with planting trees and doing creek restoration project or something like that to make up the difference.
Register Guard used to have contact to post corrections.
Yeah.
I'm sure they still have something
Yeah.
like that.
Well, I wouldn't be
So when we get there, well, USA Today probably has one somewhere across the nation that we could file a correction request on that.
Right.
Oh, for
And they
the
make a
record.
correction statement.
For the record.
And I have the name of the person that called me, so I can call him back.
And I think, was it a Statesman reporter?
It was actually,
thought
I
so.
forgot to say that
Yes.
too.
It
I was
a
gonna mention
what?
that. It was in the Register Guard, but it was actually a Statesman's Journal
Statesman Journal.
reporter.
Because they're owned by USA Today. They're all owned by USA Today,
Yeah.
so they use regional and national information.
Well, I trust your judgment. I appreciate you being honest,
Yes,
owning up to it.
thank you.
Yeah, that's the
And
key element I believe
Right.
in this government is openness, honesty. We don't hide anything. We don't play games. We just do what we think is best. And I appreciate that with you, Brian.
Yes.
Yep.
And I also think that we know you well enough to know that it won't happen again.
Well,
he's
I
gonna
cannot make him, I cannot make any guarantees that the client will not have any
No
violations,
pressure at all.
but I will promise you that we do everything.
No, but I do know that about you.
Thank
You will do your best to correct, so
Thank you.
that's all.
We appreciate the update.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Brian.
Thanks, Brian.
We're happy to answer any questions from any other departments from the city administrator's report.
They're all lined up, just waiting.
I
Councilor
just-
Fox.
I just have a comment. On the upcoming events, we missed out on concerts in the park. And I was there on Thursday night, and it was a rousing success for the first time in 2 years to see over 250 people gathered in the crescent circle dancing and having fun with their children and stuff. And it cascaded, and people were crossing the streets. People were at the
Willy-nilly.
at the winery and at the bistro. So it was-
Using the crosswalks. of
yeah,
course.
and with the,
Yeah.
I got to see the flags and motions and cars stopping. Yeah, and it made me want to annex the Main Street, because when the tractor trailer came through, that was the only downside.
And it's still a secret where the flags came from.
It's very secret.
It
I
was
love
great.
those flags.
That
Those
was
are
great.
great.
They did them in yachts for a long time.
They're awesome. They do help. You wave them around and
Sisters,
people
yeah.
can't ignore you.
I like to pick that flag up and
No, people
Challenge
were
it
usually tossing
around.
it in the street.
you're gonna cut in front of me.
Well, I think the concerts in the park is one of my favorite events in
Yeah.
Coburg. And it's so great to hear all the neighbors and stuff
Yeah.
are just really excited about it. So that's what our economic development fund is here. Keep those businesses open and people buying things and people have fun too.
The first one ever I can remember in July, so it was like 5 months, so that's great.
It's great. Any other comments or questions for any of the department heads that are here?
Are we also police department?
They're
Okay.
all here.
Yeah.
Well, I see on the upcoming events, November, December, Milo. I did that last year. And I've never been a gun owner or anything like that. I've never been interested in that because I've always thought it kind of brought the problem to my home. But I have to say that the time that I spent opened my eyes on a lot of the issues that they deal with that we don't, that we don't know about. We know about the cliche ones, but what they have to deal with that are not cliche are just as dangerous for them and the person. I'm hoping that this fall, when it comes, you guys will join me, all of you, at least to visualize it, to be there to see it. You don't have to be part of it. It's scary, actually. I left with my heart outside my chest. I couldn't believe it. And I realized that they make that decision every single day to put themselves in that line. So as a council, I'm appealing that as a group, let's at least go as a group and watch it and see what they go through.
When is it exactly?
So we have a reserved for a couple weeks in November and December. So we normally invite Oak Ridge PD. So what it is it's like a movie, and then you interact with it with a simulated gun. And so you can show where you hit. Some of them are no use of force, some of them are use of force. So it's really decision making is what we're training the officer. So it's just good experience because it'll be maybe a homeless person or at a medical facility. Could be at one of the businesses. And so
It's just a routine call.
it's just a routine, correct, routine call.
And it was less about guns than I imagined, actually. It was a lot more about negotiation and talking and appealing person to person, which we don't really think about, you know what I mean? But even when I went with them and they did their exercise at that old house, I expected, I've not shot a gun, I don't know what to expect, right? And I got my butt kicked, big time, truly, because what they're against and what I was portraying as a criminal there, they had to. But then I saw the emotion within them. Even though we were all faking it, they weren't in their mind. They were part of that moment. And I became part of that moment. And everyone's adrenaline was running and hearts were pumping. I could feel multiple officers. I could feel their heartbeat, which from my stance, I got the ability to do that, or the advantage of doing that, because I really wasn't a criminal. But it really humanized.
It's an eye
what they
opener. I
do.
went through it. The first time we brought it up, I think was when I went through it. And
They're not robots. They're literally no different.
It
than
makes you
us.
think,
We
and it
know
does get
that.
your heart
We
going.
know that on the outside, but when you're on the inside, and you see it. You get a real appreciation for it.
I agree with Counselor Alexander. If you guys ever think about that, what cops do in a routine call, that Milo training is good stuff.
It's a people
I would
business.
highly recommend it.
It really is. And again, I am a non-violent guy. I'm lucky to be the size that I am, so no one ever picks a fight on me. But I'm a huge teddy bear. I could care less about violence and violent movies and violent things. I'm not into it. And I was kind of concerned going to it thinking, oh God, here we go, another macho thing. Everyone flex their muscles. Big deal, right? Was not that. It was about people. So yeah, I hope that we can.
Except for the zombie.
That was a little weird.
Zombies.
I did really well against the zombies.
Dude, zombies was great.
See, I didn't do well because I was trying to be a realist, going, it's not real.
No,
But there are
Get out.
situations where that actually would be real. They wouldn't be a zombie. It'd be a whole different situation, but very similar. Very similar. So that was my 2 cents. I hope that we can get involved as a group. We don't have to hourly put our support, doesn't matter. What we should do on the inside as a city, I think, is support those who protect us. And at least see what they go through, a little bit, tiny bit.
So I should bring it out October 31st.
Yeah.
Yes. There you go. There you go.
I don't know,
Yeah.
that sounds scary. That could be fun, that could be part of our celebration.
Okay, any other questions, comments, discussion with our department heads, administrator?
I got one more thing. I've neglected to mention this. That's possibly at the end of October. We want to do a work session on all wastewater related issues. And before that work session, we want to set up a tour so you guys can come out during the day, take a look at the treatment plant, see what's going on, and then maybe that evening, we sit down and do a presentation on where we're at, what we see going on in the future, and any projects that we have going on.
What's that date again?
We're not quite sure, possibly October 26th, but that's
Yes.
not set,
Okay.
right, Sammy?
That was the tentative date, yeah.
This would be great stuff when we look at what we did with the build out and to see the things that Ryan and everybody has had to look at and deal with and start projecting out. So we're the ones that have to make those budget decisions. So it'll be good information.
If that is something you guys are interested in, I think we could probably do that.
Yeah.
Okay. I know Councilor Lehman's been waiting and waiting and waiting.
Me too, actually, because I missed that.
It's really very informative.
Yeah, it's good stuff.
I just have one event that's not listed, and that is that the city will partner with the other community partners to bring back the block party. So I believe it's gonna be tentatively Friday, September 17th, on Mill Street between 5:30 and 8:30. Be a live band, barbecue, and who knows what else. So it's still being put together, but it is going to return.
Good. The half chicken thing. always
Possibly.
does.
Maybe hamburgers and hot dogs to keep the cost down.
Yeah, last time we did it, it rained, so why don't we do it next week?
Yeah.
Good point.
And do we have any lead on having a community calendar online that people can go to? I constantly get questions, and especially now that Concert in the Park is in, oh, who's playing next week? And the only place I've found it is on Facebook.
So, I think,
Staff done.
you know, the city doesn't put community calendar items on our calendar. The chamber has been struggling, and that's hopefully something that we can help them with, of keeping their calendar updated. But I think the key is a link or a button from the city website to the chamber. So people can go, and I know you can get there from our website, but I think buttons on the front page is a whole lot easier
I
for
agree.
people, and so we can look at that.
I gotta say, in the last 6 weeks, I think a calendar has been probably almost discussed as much as transportation. So
You would,
it's
that's our
getting.
number one phone call at the front desk right now. Who's
I
playing?
believe it. I'm getting.
What is
tons-
that?
They're calling me up and
Every door
asking,
has it.
how do I find this on the calendar? What's coming up?
I think that's a Main Streets program, a Main Streets project. Yeah. So hopefully Tracy can work on
That'd be
it.
great.
Get one of those boards, like, you can just write on
Leaderboard.
letters up. Here's your date for music in the park.
Put it at the post office.
Well, and we could have a sign put for the sign out. We could make a sign that says community concerts.
That's a good idea.
At the, because there's a way to insert a sign into that entry sign, but I don't know that we can get it done for this year. We do have one already for Christmas in Coburg and the Car Classic and the Antique Fair already that just get inserted.
Do we have something that's printed that we could put in one of the cabinets in the kiosk?
There is about 20 copies at the front counter of the Concert in the Park signs. And a lot of people have picked them up. Cheryl's taken them. I think they have a big one of that and the Antique Fair already down there. We have them at Dairy Mart. So if they drop them off here, we're copying and distributing them where we can.
I'd like to see them in the kiosk.
Yeah.
Yeah, that kiosk could use some pretty.
Yeah, we. were
They
just
said
looking
they
at
came
that.
and got the keys, so. I don't know who did it.
We'll have to take a look.
Cheryl.
Oh.
All right.
Mayor, can I just say something to Brian?
Absolutely.
You guys are really awesome. Every time I see them out doing something, I have to stop and say, you guys are doing a great job. And they always, they're so cute.
That's the first
such
thing
a
I'm
nice
gonna
young
tell you.
man.
Yeah, team meetings, just so you know. you
You're
get-
so cute.
Yeah, especially from the council, you're cute.
Give them a pound. They are really awesome.
They,
They're very good.
they work very, very hard and they never complain.
And they're very professional, very polite. Yeah, I appreciate that. All right, believe it or not, we got through all that, and it's 8:56.
What?
Thank you, everybody.